Good morning. Oh, I hope you're well. The Lord is getting stronger in you every day. I just, guys, I just needed to be discipled this morning. I just needed somebody. I just came down here and I sat down here for a few minutes and then I just popped on the TV and turned it over to YouTube. And there he is. Isn't it amazing how you can go to heaven and still make disciples to the ends of the earth? You don't even have to be here. We've got cell phones, we got cameras, we got microphones, we got paper, we got pens, we got computers. All you got to do is leave a trail. And so he just been discipling me this morning, just because I really getting discouraged because of just things going on close. Just there's some hard things going on close to me right now. And and so I'm just down here struggling, and I'm just, God, handle this. This person could, this person just refuses to see what you want them to see. They just will not see it. I mean, and it just, so I just turned on Brother Hodges, and I just, I listen to him because I know when I listen to him, I'm listening to somebody that got it, that figured it out, or that was shown, that asked hard enough and listened hard enough that God was willing to show them, hey, here, this is it. Here's what you're supposed to be about. And personally, I think that conference at Crossway Baptist, he spells it out as well in that conference what God means for us to be about is anything I've ever seen. And I better turn this phone down because it's getting ready to start. It can buzz, but it can't holler. Okay. So that's my prayer for you. That's Ephesians chapter 1, verses 17 through 21. No matter what you think, okay, no matter what you think, no matter what your ideas are, I am praying for God to show you His idea and where you fit into it. Okay? Because I'm going to tell you something. The measure of joy, the measure of peace, the measure of happiness, and he just gave it right back to me. He just, boom, man, just flooded me with peace and happiness and joy. And I'll tell you something. Here's one thing that's been very encouraging. I have not, seriously, not had the money to go see these men in Africa. It just hadn't been there, And I work my business pretty hard. Okay, I take everything that comes in the door and I do my best to fix it, and I know how to run a business. I've done that very well in the past. It's efficient. It's set up right. I think it's right where he wants it to be, honestly. But it's just been generating just enough to keep my end of this household above water. And about 2, 3 weeks ago, I think it was 3 weeks ago, Monday, I just looked up at the ceiling tiles and then I said, God, I want to go see my men. And I named 6 of them, okay, that I want to go see. And see what they're doing and help them and encourage them and just show up, just be there with them for a while instead of it all having to be over video. Just, we'll figure out what we're going to figure out what one another smells like. And And I just told him, and I named them that morning. And that afternoon, I went to my granddaughter's house for a little while. I can't remember why we went up there, but we did. And a man called me from a town in Tennessee where I still own a house from before. There's a little old house sitting up there. It's not much of one, but it's a house, and it's paid for. And he asked me if I wanted to sell it. And see, I was thinking that this is probably the place I'll end up living because it's all I have left. You know, I'm just going to try to keep this tucked away, and there's some other complications with selling it that would have to be worked through. And it just had never occurred to me to sell that house. Well, so the next morning I got up and I said, God, what's going on? First of all, I told the man, no, I'm not interested in selling it. I'm going to rent it. And he said, well, you know, I said, but I've got your number. Let me just kind of see, you know, how I feel about it in the morning or in a few days, and I'll be in touch. And he said, okay. So I got up the next morning, and I said, is this it? Is this how I get to go see those men? And the answer was yes. And the answer was also, and I said, well, you know, but in my mind, I'm thinking about, well, I mean, where am I going to live one of these days? Where? And and the answer to that was heaven. You're going to live with me. Don't worry about that. That's my problem. Your mission is to do what I show you to do so that a sustaining gospel preaching, disciple making influence can be established throughout all over the planet. Because then, don't worry about where you're going to live. I'll take care of you here. And when you get to heaven, if you do what I say, and you endure whatever comes your way, and you keep at it, and you don't quit, and you keep going, forever is going to be quite good. I said, okay. So I called the real estate lady. She called me back. She just like that. And she said this could be done in 60 to 90 days. She went out there and looked at it, and gave me what she thought it was worth. I said, do it. I signed the listing agreement. Boom. So hopefully I'm going to be in Africa in February of next year. I'll be there the whole month. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 6 or 7 of them right now that I'd really like to go see. The ones that are making disciples. I mean, the ones that's been here for a year or two. And so that's kind of the way that works. I thought that was pretty cool, but I want you to pray for that to happen. It won't happen because it's time. It's time to go see them. But let's get off of me and let's talk about you for a minute, okay? Let's talk about words and let's talk about sentences. Okay, when you think of God, somebody asks you about God, somebody asks you about Jesus, and you respond with a sentence, what word does that sentence start with? Does it start with he? Does it start with Jesus? Does it start with I, me, we, our? Do you see what I'm saying? It needs to start with what Jesus is doing. That's boom. Your mind has turned over at that point, that we understand that our ideas about God, no matter how godly they seem, especially to other people, are only our ideas. And we're capable of having a great many ideas in the next 30 seconds. Our minds can do that. But there's only one idea that's going to matter, and that's his idea. That's what Herb Hodges was so good at. He he listened hard enough, and he stayed after God long enough that God showed him God's idea rather than his. And he majored in it, and he taught it all over the world. And that's God's plan for anybody and everybody that will move their agenda, move our life plan, our agenda, our stuff, whatever we think we want to accomplish, out of the way, and say, okay, God, I've done it. Frank Sinatra sung, I did it my way. Okay, I did it my way for about 45 years. That got me bankrupt. Alone, no friends, in jail for about a month and a half. That's where my ideas got me, and that's exactly where Satan wants your ideas to take you, because that'll make, if you're working your ideas and you're working them for God, you think, oh God, I want to do. If it starts with I want to do this, or I want people to do this, or I want people to do that, that is the most frustrating. And God, and you think God's in that. That's about. I'll tell you. Oh, that's frustrating. You will be constantly frustrated, and there will be no peace in it. You just get mad when they don't. You have no patience when you're trying to implement your ideas. You have none. Okay. And God will take you through some strange things and some strange places. Probably the strangest thing that ever happened to me was, let's back up here. Let's consider how we were raised. Now, you may have been raised by, what you call religious or church-going or God-fearing parents. You may not have. I was, by a mother that was extremely religious, and by a dad that knew about God, knew he needed to be right with God, but hated preachers with a passion. One of them got up in his face one time at some kind of a revival when he's a teenager, I guess, and told him what a dirty, rotten sinner he was, and he just never got over that. Boy, it tore him up, and he stayed tore up about it until he was diagnosed with cancer. And he went through all that, and then he changed. Thank God for that. So, but the biggest, so I was raised in a church that did not believe in having musical instruments in the building, on the property, that could not be used. They're not in the New Testament. They sang. There was no, blah, 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 and we're just not going to do that because, we're going to heaven and the rest of them are not, and on and on and on. It just never seemed to stop. The only thing I was ever good at as a kid was playing drums. I was horrible at sports, but boy, I could play. Now, I could. God gave me a great measure of talent in that area. So, one thing leads to another, and my daddy gets sick, start taking him to church. This is I'm a little over 30 years old. I'm living in Nashville, running a business. Daddy comes down because he's going to be treated here in Nashville, and he's living with me and my wife at the time. And I knew he wanted to go to church, and I told him, Daddy, I'll take you. Well, we went to church, and so I got kind of, and going to church and seeing Daddy go for his radiation treatments for about 5 weeks, and sitting in a room of people that were waiting, to go in and get their treatments, and eventually learning that Daddy was the only one they were giving a chance of survival. The rest of them, they just keeping them comfortable. That kind of, your mortality, the fact that you're not going to be here very long, starts to sink in. And it sunk into me very well. So out of that came church going back to the Church of Christ. One day I was up in another part of Nashville in Springfield, Tennessee. I was coming back through Nashville, and something, I had no idea what, but I just got a real strong feeling when I went by this particular church building that I was supposed to roll up in there on Sunday. And so I did. I just went with it. I just thought, what have I got to lose? Let's just go back and see what's going on. Well, they had a band. Worship band. They had people singing, and I think they had a small choir at that point. All these people's up on this platform, they're singing, these drums is playing, all this stuff. And me being a musician, and somebody that had been a professional musician and had played all over the country for years, at that point, I was sitting in that seat in that church building, and the only feeling I had was, God, if you'll just let me out of this building without killing me, I promise you I'll never do this again. I was scared to death because they were doing things that I had been taught were wrong right in a church building. And I had been taught that those things were wrong from the time I was big enough to understand the first word until I was old enough to go to college and get out of the town I lived in. And so the possibility that you have a lot to unlearn about God is somewhere between excellent and perfect. Okay? Luke chapter 11. That's as good of a description as Jesus' own religion as anything I've ever seen. And we need to, if I were you, I would go through that and go through it and go through it. And I'd get that, and I hope you've downloaded that little lexicon that I gave you, that the Bible Hub, and get that lexicon out and read several different translations of those scriptures of what Jesus was saying to the religious leaders of that day, because they're not very different than the religious leaders of today, with exceptions. There are exceptions, okay? And I hope I've found one here, and I'm going to find out Sunday morning if God has brought an exception to the philosophy of religion in the form of a pastor. So be praying about that too. But you got a lot to unlearn if you were raised in any kind of religion. Okay? I just heard Herb Hodges say for the 9,000th time probably, there is no credit in going to church with God. You can go to church every day and go and split hell wide open. Church going is not going to get you anywhere if that's all you do. I mean, it makes no sense from any standpoint. Okay, if you have a job, what do you do when you go to your job? Do you go to your job once a week? Do you sit in a room and do you listen to somebody talk to you about how to do your job? And then you go back home and come back a week later and get a paycheck? No. Okay, let's move this a little bit further. Let's just go back to earlier this month or late last month, Super Bowl. Let's pretend that the Super Bowl hadn't been played yet, okay? And it's Super Bowl Sunday. Both teams show up for the game, and Kyle Shanahan, the coach of the 49ers, when he brings his team onto the field to actually start the game, and they walk out, the captains walk out and they decide who's going to kick off. What happens then? Do they play the game, or do they sit on the bench and listen how the game should be played? Nothing works on this planet without some form of action. Nothing gets done, nothing happens. It takes action, it takes energy for anything to be accomplished. What's the first thing God is recorded as telling man in the recorded Bible, in the Bible? The first thing. Be fruitful and multiply. What is the last thing Jesus told us before he went back to God? Make disciples, be fruitful and multiply. I mean, how much plainer can that be? And if you want to, and when you start, if you start talking about that to a typical churchgoer, you are going to make them so mad. Okay, their flesh is going to rise up and begin to and conviction is going to set in, and they're going to get and they are going to get furious. Most of them, I mean, furious. Now, why is that? But it's because religion, they're entrenched in religion, and it forces them to try to. But the devil has got them. He's got their mind just like that, and he says, that's not right. You're fine. You're fine. That's not right. What he's saying is not right. Don't listen to him. That's what you're up against with church people for the most part. But not all of them. Okay, there are a few good men and there are a few good women, and I use that term "good" just as because we have a big movie in America called "A Few Good Men." There are a few that will. Wait a minute. There are a few people that do get up in the mornings and do get on their knees and do try to pray to God and do try to be true to God, that will resonate with. And it will resonate with them strong enough that they will want more of what you can share with them. They'll want to be, they'll want to do things the hard way. Some of us like doing things the hard way because we know that the right thing to do is always the hardest thing to do. in this body with this flesh and with this mind. And they'll come back, and they'll keep coming back. You just got to wait till they're ready. I mean, personally, I think the best way to tell somebody's ready is when they come to you, and they don't, and eventually they'll come, and they may come to you, and they may come back to you a year later. They may come back to you 2 years. They may be 3, 4, 5 years before they come back to you and say, I want to know more about this. Because what I'm seeing in this building I've been going to, it just don't make any sense as it relates to the creator of the universe. So, know that God wants to change you. God wants you to put your plans out of the way, forget them, because they're not going to get you anywhere much. And discover His specific plan for you. And His specific plan for every one of us starts with correctly executing our mission. And if if you are involved in church going and your pastor does not have one world impacting, multiplying disciple anywhere, I would caution you about listening to him. Because I'll not listen to them if the fruit's not there. What Jesus said, you'll know them by their fruits. What is fruit? Fruit is disciples. If God hadn't showed them what He really wants to be, what they're really supposed to be about, and they haven't begun to do what God intends for them to do, rather than what they intend to do, why in the world would you want to follow anybody like that? Why would you want to listen to them? Why would you want anybody like that speaking into your life? That's not God. Be careful. I don't care how good you think they are. Because they ain't a blessed one of us good. Okay? And not only can we not be good, you got to learn to be, we have to learn to be wrong. We have to learn to be made right. And then we have to learn to stay wrong and continue to stay wrong in order for Him to continue to make us right. And a pastor of a church that doesn't have one multiplying disciple is wrong. He may, but if he continues to operate in that fashion, he don't know he's wrong. You know why? Because religion has got him right there. Religion got him trying to be right, and they work themselves into the ground. It's one of the most exhausting, frustrating occupations there is, because they're not properly executing God's plan for their life. They don't understand it. And that's not reason to, so this is not dislike or disdain I'm talking about for a man. This is just you don't get caught up in that, and don't let them convince you to get caught up in that, because there's no usefulness in it. Pray for them. Love them. Start praying Ephesians chapter 1, verses 17 through 21 for them. Start in verse 15, go through 21. Whatever form of that scripture God gives you to pray for that person, start praying for them. Pray for God to give you a teachable moment with them where you can just, hopefully, they'll speak something into their life that will change the way they see things. You see, they think they've got the whole brunt of the work of God for however many people showing up to listen to them. They think they've got that on their shoulders, and they don't. That's something that's supposed to be on God's shoulders, because we're all supposed to be making disciples. Sitting in a building, Jesus never sat in a building. Jesus never had his people sit in a building and go back home. It's not in there, gentlemen. It's not in the New Testament anywhere, because it does not work. It will not work. We've proved it will not work for 1,800 years. I mean, good night of living. All we have to do is reach people. Start reaching people, making ourselves available, and then train them to reach people, and then train them to reach people. And in that training comes, here's the kind of person that's going to be able to reach people and build people. And see, because when you reach 2 or 3 of them and you lead them to the Lord and they say, yes, I believe, then you got to show them what to do next. And that's when you start learning. That's when you're able to learn. That's when what am I going to tell them? Whatever God tells you to tell them. Give them the Disciples Daily Devotional. Read Herb Hodges' studies to them. Show them his videos. You got all kinds of stuff you can give them. Write stuff. But whatever you do, don't tell them to go to church every Sunday and that's all they need to do, because it's not. There's not a business, there's not a school, there's not an organization, there's nothing on this planet that works the way it's supposed to work by a bunch of people showing up and listening to somebody talk about God and then going right back out the door and say, well, I'm governing my own life till next Sunday, and I'll show back up here and I'll put my money in the plate and I'll listen to this man and I'll sing these songs. And I might even invite somebody to come to that building this week. That is as useless. That in itself is just useless. It doesn't work. Don't do it. Don't do just that. I love you.